share this video. Do me a favor, please share this video. We finally got the reply brief from the prosecutors. They finally filed it. It's filed late because it's supposed to have been filed yesterday, February the 20th. And it was not filed yesterday, and this morning when we woke up, it still wasn't filed. They filed it today. That's late. That's beyond the deadline. The deadline was yesterday, Friday. They did not file it. They did not file it yesterday. It got filed today. It's 83 pages. It's 83 pages. And they filed it late. I just read it. It's nothing. It's a zero. It's a big fat zero. They have nothing. First of all, I want everybody to email the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, and let her know that the Southern District of New York prosecutors filed the reply brief late. Carol McDonald, what up? Intelligent Hoodlum, what up? Johnny Cage, what up? Houston in the building. Ilya David, Ilya, what up? Tyrone Phillips, good afternoon. Sean G, let down to the business free puff, sidebar. He needs to be set free with all this craziness that has happened in this case. So, here is the document, okay? 83 pages. 83 pages. You can get this on Pacer. They backdated it. On Pacer, it's backdated for February 20th. But by the end of business yesterday, it was not there. I woke up this morning and people were reaching out to me. Yo, Sean, did you get it? I said, no, I didn't get it. It just came available by noon today. So it's late. That being the case, that being a fact that it's late, all bets should be off. They failed to meet the deadline. They knew that they had until February 20th to file the reply brief. They've been knowing for months. These are supposed to be elite level, what's the name of them schools? Ivy League lawyers, you know, the best of the best. And they file the reply brief late. And this is why they lost. This is why at trial, the Southern District of New York prosecutors, here they all go right here. Here they go. Here they go right there. Jay Clayton was the U.S. attorney. He's the U.S. attorney now. Damian Williams was the U.S. attorney. He was the one that brought the case. He didn't disappear. He don't nobody know where he at. He didn't made a mess. Damian Williams is responsible for this mess. Well, his name is on it, but he was acting on behalf of the powers that be that made him do it. Okay? Here's the assistant U.S. attorneys. To be argued by Christy Slavic, Meredith Foster, Emily Johnson, Christy Slavic, Madison Smizer, Reddick Smizer, Mitzi Steiner. These were the same assistant U.S. attorneys that got beat at trial, that lost at trial. Maureen Comey was on their team. She got fired after the trial. This is Christy Slavic. She's going to argue the appeal. We want that. We want Christy Slavic to argue the appeal because Christy Slavic gave the closing argument for the jury and she lost. Mark Agnifilo made her look like a little league left fielder. His Mark Agnifilo's closing argument versus Christy Slavic's closing argument, it wasn't even close. And I said this the whole trial, that the prosecutors were way outmatched. They were out of their league. When you looked at them and then you looked at Puffy's lawyers, it wasn't even close as to who dominated the courtroom. Puffy's lawyers controlled the courtroom. They dominated the courtroom. They walked around the courtroom like they owned it. It wasn't even close. It wasn't even close. Now, here you have the same assistant U.S. attorneys filed the reply brief late. What is that? What is that? Page 1. Here's their brief. This is their brief. Page 1. Statement of facts. Statement of facts. Look at them. This is the assistant. Look at that. Statement of facts. The prosecutor's proof at trial established that for more than a decade and on hundreds of occasions, Puffy paid dozens of male commercial workers or escorts to do the raccoon with two of Puffy's girlfriends, Cassie Ventura and Funny Blue Jacket's girl, Jane. Funny Blue Jacket. Jane was a pseudonym used at trial to protect the victim's privacy. Jane. But Funny Blue Jacket, we know that was your lady. Stephanie Webb, what up? That's Funny Blue Jacket's girl. Funny Blue Jacket. Y'all know who Funny Blue Jacket is? These raccoon sessions, freak-offs, or hotel nights went on for days, for hours, as Puffy directed the encounters, masturbated, and often filmed. Puffy, look at what they say. Look at how weak the prosecutor's reply brief is right off the bat. Puffy plied Cassie and Jane with drugs and was at times physically violent, hitting, kicking, and punching them before, during, or after freak-offs or hotel nights. What does that have to do with USC 2421 transporting individuals for interstate commerce to engage in prostitution? What does that have to do? Look at what they're saying. Look, y'all. That has nothing to do with the appeal. The government's evidence at trial included testimony of 34 witnesses. Christy Slavic, Meredith Foster, Emily Johnson, Madison Reddick Smizer, Mitzi Steiner, and Maureen Comey, Jay Clayton, and Damian Williams brought 34 witnesses to testify at the trial, including Ventura and Jane, 2 escorts, and several of Combs's former employees. And they still lost. Puffy didn't bring no witnesses. Puffy didn't even put on a defense. Now, funny blue jacket. 34, the government evidence at the trial, 34 witnesses. Out of those 34 witnesses, only one of those witnesses showed up in Funny Blue Jacket's documentary, the Netflix documentary. Only one, Capricorn Clark. And Capricorn Clark perjured herself on the stand. Hit that like button, y'all. Hit that like button and share this video with somebody in your contact list. Look at their argument. Look how weak the prosecution's reply brief is. After meeting Cassie, Puffy, the head of Bad Boy Records at the time, what's up, Maria? I see you. Puffy, the head of Bad Boy Records at the time, signed Cassie to a record contract. What does that have to do with the Mann Act? Began pursuing her romantically when she was 21 years old and he was 38 years old. What does that have to do with the Mann Act? She was his girlfriend. Soon as Ventura's boyfriend, it's a typo in here. Look at this. This shit ain't even right. Soon as Ventura's boyfriend and boss, Puffy began controlling many areas of Cassie's life, including her career, appearance, day-to-day activities, and social interactions. Shortly after their romantic relationship started, Puffy became severely abusive to Cassie, smashing her in the head, knocking her over, dragging her, kicking her, and stomping on her head. What does this have to do with the Mann Act? They have nothing. This is so, this has nothing to do with USC 2421. They are still trying to argue Christy Slavic, Emily Johnson, Meredith Foster, Madison Reddick Smizer, Mitzi Steiner are still trying to argue the racketeering conspiracy and the sex trafficking with the predicate offenses. Y'all lost that. Y'all lost. You got destroyed. You got beat bad. The jury rejected your argument. The jury, 12 members, 12 citizens of New York City rejected your argument and they acquitted him. Why are you still talking about the racketeering conspiracy and the sex trafficking? This abuse regularly left Cassie with knots in her forehead, busted lips, swollen lips, black eyes, and bruises all over her body. More than a dozen witnesses testified at trial. After Puffy began to physically abuse Cassie, he introduced her to freak-offs, during which Puffy directed and often video recorded Cassie doing the raccoon with male escorts. Freak-offs often lasted for 2 or 3 days and followed a similar pattern, which Puffy dictated. Continuous application of baby oil, mutual touching, and masturbation oral sex, and penetrative sex. Cassie, what's the word I'm looking for, y'all? Cassie initiated this. Cassie put these together. She organized the freak-offs. Cassie used to take the baby oil and put it in the baby pool, put it in the bathtub, and run hot water on the baby oil to make it warm. Cassie put the baby oil on the Punisher. Cassie and Jane were willing participants. Puffy then did the raccoon with Cassie, often with the escort semen still on Ventura's body. What does that have to do with USC 2421, transportation of individuals across state lines for interstate commerce to engage in prostitution? What does this have to do? Look at that. Look, y'all, listen. This is why they lost. Freak-offs were fueled by copious amounts of drugs that Combs, Puffy provided Ventura, including ecstasy, MDMA, ketamine, and GHB. The drugs were dissociative and numbing, allowing Cassie to get through freak-offs, emotionless sex with a stranger that she didn't want to be having sex with. Yo, why they lying? Oh man, why y'all? Yo, Christy Slavic, Madison Reddick, Smizer, Missy Steiner, Emily Johnson. Why y'all lying, man? Why are y'all lying? Cassie had a 7-8 year relationship with Clayton Howard. Look at what they said, y'all. This is page 5. Puffy gave her drugs. Cassie was already using drugs before she got with Puff. Emotionless sex with a stranger that she didn't want to be having sex with. Look, man. Look. Yo, this is nothing. This is nothing, man. At Puffy's suggestion, I'm going over this. You know, sometimes I'll read these first and then go over it with y'all, but I got to check out of here at 4 o'clock. I got a late checkout. So we just going to go over it together. And whatever we don't cover now, we'll cover later on. We're going later on, man. Over time, freak-offs became frequent occurrences, taking place as often as weekly. Puffy often arranged for escorts to travel interstate or internationally to participate in freak-offs and provided cash to pay escorts for doing the raccoon. Cassie arranged for the escorts to travel. Funny Blue Jacket's girlfriend arranged for the escorts that she was in love with to travel. Here we go, y'all. You know they was gonna bring this part up. Page 5, bottom paragraph. Listen, Puffy was often physically violent towards Cassie before, during, and after freak-offs. One beating took place at the Intercontinental Hotel in Los Angeles when Puffy punched Ventura in the face during a freak-off and then hit, kicked, and attempted to drag her back to the hotel room after she attempted to leave. A straight up lie. Case JP, 24th floor. Yo, they lying. Lie. One beating took place at the Intercontinental Hotel in Los Angeles when Puffy punched Ventura in the face during a freak-off. There was no proof of that. The prosecutor was never able to prove with video, with testimony from Jules Theodore. They said that Jules Theodore was in a hotel room at the Intercontinental Hotel and that they were having a freak off, and that Cassie was trying to leave the freak off, but Jules Theodore never testified at the trial. They never showed no video or pictures of him in the room. They never were able to show beyond reasonable doubt that a freak off was going on. That was the narrative that they put down. What actually happened when Puffy whooped her ass, when Puffy whooped Cassie's ass, Puffy assaulted her. That was a domestic violence charge. That was an assault charge. Had Cassie filed a complaint against Puffy in Los Angeles City Court or Los Angeles County Court, Orange County Court, or California State Court, Puffy would have been cold busted for domestic violence, cold busted for assault and battery. 1000% he assaulted Cassie. But it had nothing to do with a freak off, or the government was never able to prove that. What Teddy Garagos did prove during the cross-examination was that Cassie stole that nigga's phone. Cassie stole Puffy's phone like she always did and went through his phone. She be calling Gina. She called Kim Porter. She calling all Puffy's girlfriends because she was jealous. And Puffy used to do the same thing. Puffy would steal her phone and call Michael B. Jordan and call Kid Cudi and call the nigga from the NFL. Cassie had a 1-year relationship with Kid Cudi while she was with Puff. Cassie had a relationship with an NFL football player while she was with Puff. Cassie had a relationship with Michael B. Jordan from the Black Panther and Creed while she was with Puff. Cassie testified on the stand that she carried on a friendship and a relationship with Jules Theodore when Puff wasn't around. Cassie was involved with Clayton Howard, whose name was Dave, in the trial for 7 years. When Combs punched Cassie in the face during the freak-off and then hit, kicked, and attempted to drag Cassie back to the hotel room after she attempted to leave. Another beating took place in New York when Puffy assaulted Cassie between freak-off sessions, throwing a glass liquor bottle at her head, grabbing her by the hair, dragging her into the bedroom, and slapping her as he told her, "Bitch, when I tell you to come here, you come now, not later." Faced with this violence, Cassie continued participating in freak-offs in part because she didn't really know what no would be. Look at another typo, page 6, top of page 6, top paragraph, top of page 6. Ventura continued participating in freak-offs in part because she didn't really know what no would be or what no could turn into. Okay, no, it's not a typo, y'all. My mistake with Combs. So they're saying she didn't know what would happen if she said no. Yo, this is why they lost. This is why they lost. We're Funny Blue Jacket. Send this to Funny Blue Jacket, because now we finna talk about Funny Blue Jacket girl. Look at Funny Blue Jacket. Look at Funny Blue Jacket girl. Jane. As with Jane, as time went on, I gotta turn on the AC, y'all. Hold up. It's hot in here. Hold up. Freak Puff. As time went on, Jane began telling Puffy that she wanted to stop doing hotel nights. But after Puffy began paying Jane's rent in April 2023, Puffy repeatedly threatened to withhold her rent when she protested against hotel nights. Yo, this is why they lost. So this is just talking about Jane saying she didn't want to do a freak off or whatever, a hotel night. Cassie's, they called freak offs. Funny Blue Jackets girl, they called them hotel nights. Jane told Puffy that she did not want to fly from Los Angeles to see him in New York because she did not want to be used and locked in a room to perform and fulfill your fantasies. She bought him a TV. Jane Doe took Funny Blue Jacket's child support money and bought Puff a TV so that Jane Doe and Puff could watch the hotel night episodes with Funny Blue Jacket money. Jane also told Puff that she did not want to feel obligated to perform these nights with you in fear of losing the roof over my head. Puffy used to always tell her, yo, if you want to move, move. I'll even let you say, who that right there? Blitz Spot. Blitz Spot, thank you for the super chat. Puffy used to tell her, yo, she would tell Puff, Funny Blue Jacket, yo, who is Funny Blue Jacket? Put it in the live chat so everybody know who Funny Blue Jacket is. We gotta have a glossary and a bibliography so everybody know when I say Funny Blue Jacket, everybody know who it is. Who is Funny Blue Jacket? Put it in the live chat. Tyrone Phillips. Danny James. Carol McDonald. Alicia Butler. Blitz Spot. All right, that's just so we know who Funny Blue Jacket is. Funny Blue Jacket. Puffy, Jane Doe would get mad with Puff because Jane Doe wanted to be Puffy's girlfriend. Funny Blue Jacket wanted Jane Doe to be his girlfriend. Jane Doe rejected Funny Blue Jacket. She said, nah, Funny Blue Jacket, you corny, you whack. I don't like you. I'm in love with Puff. She used to beg Puff, be with me. I want to be your girlfriend, be my boyfriend. And Puffy used to tell her from the door, no, I'm seeing multiple women. This came out at the trial. Jane Doe would get mad. And Puffy would tell her, if you don't want to do this, leave. Leave me alone. I'll even pay 3 more months worth of rent for you. Maureen Comey asked Jane Doe on the stand under oath in the testimony on the record at the trial. Maureen Comey asked and said, Jane Doe, when Puffy told you he was seeing multiple women, how did that make you feel? Jane Doe on the stand under oath, right hand to the sky, said, I told myself I was going to deal with it. I was just going to be one of his women. You can stay in the crib 90 more days. I'll pay 3 more months worth of rent. But if you want to leave, leave. Leave. But she never left. About a month later, October 16, 2023, Jane repeatedly texts Puffy that she did not want to participate in hotel nights anymore. Jane Doe, quote unquote, I don't want to be fucked and mistreated. I don't feel like performing loveless, cold sex. I'm not a porn star. I'm not an animal. It's been 3 years of me having to fuck strangers. I need a break. I can't be in another hotel room doing drugs and performing exhausted for days. Top of page 8. Top of page 8. Top of page 8. You can pull this down on Pacer. See, this is a lie because Jane Doe carried on conversations and relationships with Cabral when Puff wasn't around. With Antoine when Puff wasn't around. Right? This is what she did. She went to Vegas with another rapper on his plane to celebrate that rapper's girlfriend's birthday. And when they got to the hotel room in Vegas, Antoine was already there doing the raccoon with another honey. And then the rapper turned around and said, Jane Doe, do you know anybody else that we could bring? And Jane Doe said, yes, I can call Cabral. And then Jane Doe showed her titties. In June 2024, just a month after Puffy publicly apologized when the video of his assault of Cassie was publicly released, Puffy viciously assaulted Funny Blue Jackets girl Jane after she provoked him. She provoked him. Puffy and Jane Doe had one fight, one in 3 years. Cassie never called 911 on Puff. Cassie never filed a police report on Puff. Cassie never went to the emergency room on Puff. Nothing in 11 years. Jane Doe and Puff had one fight, and this is after she starts meeting with the feds, and they tell her, we need you to provoke him. Get into a fight with him. We need violence. And Puffy was at her house, or his house that he was paying the rent at, and Jane Doe took Puffy's head and slammed it into the countertop, unprovoked. If Jane Doe would have took Sean G's head, took my head, and slammed my head into the countertop, I would have whooped her ass too. Ain't no doubt. Ain't no doubt. Page 9. Combs use of others to facilitate freak-offs and hotel nights. Puffy used the services of his staff as well as outsiders to facilitate freak-offs and hotel nights. Christina Quorum, Puffy's chief of staff, helped coordinate travel and hotel rooms for freak-offs and hotel nights, ensured that Puffy had cash to pay escorts, and connected Puffy to a drug supplier to ensure that Puffy had drugs on hand for freak-offs. This is the trafficking case. Why are y'all trying to still prove the trafficking case? You lost that. You lost that. I'm going through this I'm going through this with y'all at the same time. The defense case. Puffy advanced the defense case by introducing exhibits and through his cross-examinations of government witnesses and jury addresses. Throughout trial, Puffy conceded his physical violence. Puffy argued, however, that domestic violence is not trafficking or any other charged crime, and there was no evidence that Cassie engaged in any activity because of violence or threat of violence. The verdict. On June 2nd, 2025, the jury convicted Puffy on counts 3 and 5, the Mann Act counts, and acquitted him of counts 1, 2, and 4, the racketeering conspiracy and the SEX trafficking. Meaning that they lost. Southern District of New York lost. These lawyers, they all lost. They got beat. In his post-trial motion for a judgment of acquittal under Federal Rule Criminal Procedure 29, Puffy argued that to avoid constitutional problems, the Mann Act should be narrowly construed to apply only to defendants who have a commercial motive, or at the very least, to Johns who pay a prostitute to do the raccoon with the John. Puffy further argued that acquittal was warranted because his conduct, which included filming the freak-offs, was protected by the First Amendment. The prosecutors opposed that motion. After oral argument, the judge in Puffy's case, that only had 2 years on the bench, denied Puffy's motion in a detailed written decision. The judge rejected Puffy's proposed construction and held that the correct definition of prostitution in the Mann Act is sex in exchange for money or its equivalent, as the jury had been instructed at Combs' own request. The judge carefully considered each of Puffy's constitutional arguments and found them to be without merit. The judge also rejected Puffy's standalone challenge to his conviction under the First Amendment of the Constitution. I'm on my live. I'm live on YouTube.
Okay.
The sentencing. Now they want to talk about the sentencing. In advance of sentencing, the probation office calculated Puffy's advisory sentencing range under the guidelines to be 70 to 87 months, based on an offense level of 27 and a criminal history category of 1. The probation office applied the November 2024 guidelines manual and calculated the offense level as follows. The offenses in counts 3 and 5 had 10 victims. They're saying, look at this shit, y'all. Look at this shit. The offenses in the Mann Act counts had 10 victims. Cassie and Jane and 8 escorts. But they didn't call 8 escorts to get on the stand at the trial. Only 2 escorts were called to testify. Both of them lived and worked in New York. Both of them did not travel across state lines to do the raccoon with Cassie. They did the raccoon in New York. No interstate commerce. Cassie set those up. They're saying they had 10 victims, each of which was treated as a separate group. With respect to each of the groups, the base offense level was 14. With respect to the 2 groups pertaining to Cassie and Jane, a 4-level increase applied because the offense involved fraud or coercion. This is where they busted at. This is where they busted at. Look. Page 12. Page 12. Send this to the appeals court, the Second Circuit. Fraud or coercion. With respect to each of the groups, a 4-level leadership increase applied for a leadership enhancement. Look, leadership enhancement. That's the racketeering conspiracy. Fraud and coercion is the trafficking. He got acquitted of those. That's acquitted conduct. So here they are showing that Puff was over sentenced and that he needs to be resentenced at the very least and needs to have immediate release. The combined offense level for the 10 groups was 27, based on the highest offense level applicable to any of the groups, and a 5-level increase based on more than 5. What a fucking bunch of bullshit. The probation office recommended 60 months. Puffy objected to the application of the fraud and coercion enhancement, the leadership enhancement, and the grouping enhancement, principally invoking the new acquitted conduct guideline, which provides that relevant conduct does not include conduct for which the defendant was criminally charged and acquitted in federal court, unless such conduct also establishes in whole or in part the instant offense of conviction. Combs further argued that the judge could not consider acquitted conduct under Section 3553 without raising serious constitutional and fairness concerns. Puffy calculated his guidelines range to be 6 to 12 months imprisonment and sought a sentence of at most 14 months. The judge opposed Puffy's objections and raised its own guideline objections, arguing, among other things, that the judge should apply the threats of fear, cross-reference, and other enhancements, which would increase Combs' guideline sentence to 240 months imprisonment, the statutory maximum. Yo, this is crazy. The government, the prosecutor, sought a sentence of at least 135 months. Page 14. Page 14, the sentencing. On October 3rd, hold on, y'all, let me eat some cottage cheese. On October 3rd, 2025, Puffy appeared before the judge for sentencing. At the outset, the judge addressed Puffy's foundational objection regarding the extent to which the court may consider so-called acquitted conduct in determining the correct range under the sentencing guidelines. The judge, I don't even say the judge's name no more, man. I don't even say his name no more. He wasn't no real judge. The judge noted the lack of case law interpreting the new guideline, which was ambiguous given that in most cases, including this one, juries don't acquit defendants of conduct, they acquit them of charges. That is crazy. So what the judge said was that being that the new Amendment 826, the 1B1.3, is so new that there aren't that many cases where that law, acquitted conduct sentencing, was challenged, he had nothing to go on. So he took it upon himself to go with the lower standard. However, the accompanying application note referring to overlapping conduct suggested that the real test is simple: to determine whether conduct that underlies an acquitted charge also establishes in whole or in part the instant offense of conviction. Regarding what establishes in whole or in part means, it's best understood as a relevancy test. Evidence is not relevant if it does not tend to prove or disprove an element of offense. Wow, this is crazy. This is crazy. The judge acknowledged that applying the guideline will necessarily lead to some line drawing questions, which the Sentencing Commission recognized, stating that the court will be in the best position to determine whether such overlapping conduct establishes in whole or in part the instant offense of conviction, and therefore qualifies as relevant conduct. The district court had done its best to do that in this case. The judge underscored that ultimately the extent to which acquitted conduct may be considered in calculating the advisory guidelines range was a narrow and, in this case, inconsequential issue, because the judge considers all the facts, applying a preponderance of the evidence standard to impose a sentence sufficient but not greater than the necessary to comply with the purposes set out. So the judge said that he was able to apply the standard of by a preponderance of the evidence, which is a lower standard than beyond reasonable doubt. The jury has to decide their verdict on beyond reasonable doubt, which is the highest standard. This motherfucking judge said that fuck what the jury said, that they acquitted him of all of the fraud and coercion and all of that, the drugs. He's going to come down here and use by preponderance of the evidence, which is a lower standard where it just has to be hearsay or testimony, whether that testimony was perjury or not, and that he can use that to sentence Puff to whatever he wanted. This is what happened to Puff. Man, this is crazy, man. Turning to the guidelines calculation itself, the judge overruled both parties' objections. The judge declined the prosecution's request to apply the threats of fear cross-reference. Ventura and Jane testified credibly that there was psychological, emotional, and physical violence in connection with the freak-offs and hotel night. There was no violence with Jane. That's a lie. Another lie, Christy Slavitt. Meredith Foster, you lying in this brief. Perjury in the brief. However, the technical question before the judge was the intersection between the acquitted conduct provision and the cross-reference. Applying the acquitted conduct guideline, the judge found that the conduct on which the prosecutors relied to support the cross-reference was acquitted conduct because it underlay the acquitted trafficking charge, and the prosecutors had not demonstrated that there was evidence that would establish in whole or in part the prostitution charges. That also proves by a preponderance of the evidence that Puffy caused Ventura and Jane to engage in doing the raccoon by threatening or placing them in immediate fear as required under the cross-reference. The judge also overruled Puffy's objections to the 3 enhancements at issue in this appeal. With respect to the grouping enhancement, the judge found that Ventura, Jane, and at least 7 escorts were victims. So why weren't these 7 escorts called to testify? Only 2 escorts came to testify, but they're referencing 7 escorts. At the sentencing, they referenced 10 escorts. Only 2 came to testify. With respect to fraud coercion enhancement, the judge found that the 2 instances cited by the prosecutors concerning Puffy's threats to release videos of freak-offs to Ventura and threats concerning Jane's home in connection with the hotel nights also prove by a preponderance of the evidence that coercion was used under the definition provided in the guidelines. With respect to the leadership enhancement, the judge found that Puffy was the organizer or leader of a criminal activity that involved at least 5 other criminally responsible participants and was otherwise extensive. It's crazy, man. In applying the fraud, coercion, and leadership enhancement, the judge considered the acquitted conduct guideline and found that the evidence on which he relied was properly considered because it established in part the Mann Act offenses. The judge also expressly noted that he would impose the same sentence under section 3553 even if the fraud, coercion, and leadership enhancements did not apply. After calculating, Puffy's advisory guidelines range to be 70 to 87 months imprisonment, and hearing from the parties, Puffy, Puffy's children, and others on behalf of Puff, the judge addressed section 3553 factors and explained the reason for Puffy's sentence. At the outset, the judge made clear that Puffy was being sentenced for the offenses of conviction, the Mann Act charges here, and not the SEX trafficking charge, and not the RICO that he was acquitted of. The judge considered Puffy's mitigating factors, including his iconic work history, impact on the Black community, and entrepreneurship, his efforts to help his fellow inmates, his devotion to his family, and his previous drug addiction. On the other side of the ledger, however, the severity of the conduct at issue, the violence, the drugs, the coercion, and the devastation that it caused to Mr. Combs' victims. For more than a decade, Puffy from a position of power and control abused his victims physically, emotionally, and psychologically. and used that abuse to get his way, especially when it came to freak-offs. After carefully considering all of the Section 3553 factors, including the need to avoid unwarranted sentencing disparities, the judge sentenced Puff principally to below guideline sentence of 15 months imprisonment, to be followed by 5 years release. Crazy, man. I gotta check out, y'all. So we got more to go. I'm gonna see y'all later. We on page 18. We on page 18. We on page 18. Free Puff. Matty Ice. So this is the government's reply brief. These are the lawyers, the assistant U.S. attorneys who lost at the criminal trial, who filed this document late. They filed this document, they missed the deadline. Send this video, send an email to the United States Attorney Pamela Bondi and tell her that Meredith Foster, Emily Johnson, Christy Slavitt, Madison Reddick Smizer, and Mitzi Steiner filed their reply brief late. That should be grounds for acquittal right there. Puffy's motion for an appeal should be approved because the Southern District of New York did not meet the deadline. They filed it late. It was due yesterday. It came up on PACER today, but it was backdated. It was backdated for yesterday. They had months to prepare this. They knew what the deadline was and they didn't meet it. I'll see y'all in a little while. Peace.